The truffle-infused wild mushroom risotto was a cold, congealed mess. A metaphor, Alara Vance thought wryly, for her 5-year relationship with Liam Sterling. She'd spent 3 hours in the kitchen, channeling her frustration into the fine julienne of the carrots and the perfect sear on the scallops. It was their anniversary, not of their wedding, God no, but of their first date. The one where he'd taken her to a dingy hot dog stand and they'd talked for hours under the neon glow of a laundromat sign, the city humming around them. She'd worn this very dress, a simple emerald silk sheath, because he'd once told her it made her eyes look like deep forest pools. Now, it just felt stupid. The candle she'd lit at 7 had burned down to a nub, wax pooling onto her grandmother's china. The single rose and the crystal vase on the table seemed to be drooping in solidarity. Outside their high-rise apartment, the lights of Viridia Bay twinkled, a sprawling jewel box of life and energy that felt a million miles away from her silent, waiting dining room. Her phone buzzed, skittering across the marble countertop. A text. Not a call. Of course. Liam *** emergency strategy session with Kai. The Henderson account is a nightmare. Can't get out of it. So sorry, baby. Don't wait up. Order in, ***. Alara stared at the screen until the letters blurred. The Henderson account. It was always the Henderson account, or the Fitzpatrick merger, or some other corporate beast that demanded more of him than she ever could. She could picture him in his pristine office, tie loosened, a crystal tumbler of whiskey in his hand as he and Kai discussed market fluctuations. There was no emergency. There was just convenience. A hot, sharp pressure built behind her eyes. She wouldn't cry. She was done crying over lukewarm dinners and broken promises. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Sebastian Bastian Gray, the flamboyant heart of their social circle and her primary source of gossip and gin. Bastian ***, darling, are you haunting your apartment or painting the town emerald without me? Liam just posted a story from the Oculus bar. With Kai. And, oh dear, is that Chloe Dubois's manicure in the foreground? Alara's blood ran cold, then hot. She opened the social media app. There it was. A 10-second video from Liam's perspective, panning across the dizzying, panoramic view from the Oculus, the city's most exclusive rooftop bar. Kai's stern profile was visible, and then, as the camera swung, a flash of a perfectly manicured hand with glittering chrome nails, Chloe's signature, resting on Liam's forearm. The lie was so casual, so effortless. It wasn't a business meeting. It was a party. And he'd brought Chloe. The pressure behind her eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, clear fury. It was a feeling so sharp and focused it was almost peaceful. She stood up, her movements deliberate. She picked up the plate of ruined risotto, walked to the trash, and scraped it in with a satisfying finality. She blew out the dead candle. Then, she started cleaning. She scrubbed the already clean counters, her hands moving with a frantic, angry energy. She needed to do something, to burn off the betrayal coursing through her. As she bent to wipe a phantom smudge from the floor near the sink, her silk-socked foot hit a patch of water she'd missed. Her legs shot out from under her. It wasn't a dramatic, movie-style fall, it was a clumsy, graceless slip. Her hip connected sharply with the hardwood floor, and the back of her head snapped against the lower cabinet door with a sickening thwack. Stars exploded behind her eyelids. Not the romantic, city-light kind. The painful, nauseating kind. The front door clicked open. "Elle? You still up?" Liam's voice echoed in the vast apartment, sounding slightly slurred and annoyingly cheerful. He walked into the kitchen, his tall frame filling the doorway. He was still in his suit pants and dress shirt, the top buttons undone, his tie missing. He smelled of expensive whiskey and Chloe's cloying, spicy perfume. He saw her on the floor, clutching her head, and his face went pale. "Alara." "Shit." He rushed over, skidding to his knees beside her. His hands fluttered over her, unsure where to land. "Are you okay? What happened?" The concern in his voice was genuine, and for a split second, it disarmed her. Then she saw the faint lipstick smudge on his collar. Not her shade. The pain in her head throbbed in time with her heartbeat. But her mind had never been clearer. This man, who she had loved, who had just lied to her and was now smelling of another woman, was looking at her with pure, unadulterated panic. It was the most attention he'd paid her in months. And in that crystalline moment of pain and fury, the most deliciously wicked idea she had ever had bloomed in her mind. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was her only form of power. She let her hand drop from her head. She blinked slowly, letting her eyes go wide and unfocused. She looked directly at his frightened face, and she let all the recognition, all the love, all the shared history, drain from her expression. She molded her features into a perfect mask of blank, terrified confusion. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was a soft, fragile thread of sound. Who are you?" The effect was instantaneous and more satisfying than she could have ever imagined. Liam's jaw went slack. All the color drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly shade of gray. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, his own. It's me. Liam, he stammered, his voice cracking. "Alara, this isn't funny." She continued to stare, letting a slight tremble touch her lower lip. "Where am I? What is this place?" The panic in his eyes was a drug. He scrambled backward, fumbling for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. "I'm calling an ambulance. Just stay still." As he babbled into the phone, giving their address in a rushed, frantic tone, Alara let her head loll back against the cabinet. The throbbing pain was real, but the serene smile that wanted to curve her lips was not. She suppressed it. The ambulance arrived with a whirl of lights that painted their white walls in frantic strokes of red and blue. The paramedics, a calm, efficient man and woman, checked her over. Liam hovered, a useless, pacing mess, repeating, "She fell. She hit her head. She doesn't know who I am." The female paramedic shone a light in Alara's eyes. "Pupils are equal and reactive. Can you tell me your name, honey?" "Alara," she whispered, which was true. "Do you know what day it is?" She let her brow furrow in genuine-looking effort. I'm not sure." The paramedics exchanged a look. At the hospital, after a CT scan came back clear, a young, tired-looking doctor examined her. Liam stood in the corner, looking like a little boy who'd lost his mother. "Physically, you're fine," the doctor said, scrolling through the results. "No concussion, no fracture. But the mind is a tricky thing. Sometimes, after a traumatic event or a sharp shock, it can protect itself by walling off certain memories. It's called a dissociative fugue, or situational amnesia. It's usually temporary." Liam made a choked sound. "Temporary? How temporary?" The doctor shrugged. "Could be hours. Could be days. There's no way to know. The best thing is to avoid stress, don't force memories, and let her familiar surroundings and people gently guide her back." Familiar surroundings and people, Alara thought. Asterisk perfect. Asterisk. As a nurse finished her discharge paperwork, Liam approached the bed, his expression a tortured mix of guilt and fear. "Alara," he said, his voice soft and pleading. "It's me. Liam. We're together. We live together." She looked at him, at the lipstick on his collar, at the man who had chosen a rooftop bar with another woman over their anniversary. She let her eyes fill with nothing but vacant politeness. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice a hollow echo. "I don't remember you." The stunned, devastated look on his face was the most captivating thing she had ever seen. The game was on. And for the first time in a long time, Alara Vance was the one holding all the cards. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room hummed like a swarm of angry bees, a sound that grated against Alara's already frayed nerves. She kept her expression carefully blank, a pristine canvas of confusion, but inside, her mind was racing a mile a minute. Liam was falling apart. It was both satisfying and pathetic to watch. He paced the small space at the foot of her bed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair until it stood in disheveled peaks. He'd tried everything in the last hour. He'd shown her photos on his phone, pictures of them smiling on a beach in Bali, at a friend's wedding, cuddled up on this very couch. Each one was a stab to her real, very much intact memory, but she simply blinked at them, offering a weak, apologetic smile. "It looks nice," she'd say, her voice a soft, hollow thing that didn't sound like her own. Asterisk nice, asterisk, he'd repeated, his voice cracking with frustration. "Alara, that's us. We were so happy there." His desperation had a certain pungent smell to it, like spoiled milk. It was the stink of guilt, not love. Every time he looked at her, she could see the gears turning in his head, Asterisk I lied to her, I was with Chloe, and now this is my punishment. Asterisk good. Let him stew. The door to the room swung open, and a new presence filled the doorway. Kai Thorne. He was as immaculate as ever, a stark contrast to Liam's unraveling state. His dark, tailored coat was damp with the evening's mist, and his sharp jaw was set in its usual neutral line. His eyes, the color of a winter storm, scanned the room, taking in the scene, Liam's panic, Alara's propped-up feebleness, in a single, comprehensive glance. He didn't speak. Kai. Thank God, Liam burst out, rushing to his friend as if to a lifeline. It's the amnesia. She doesn't remember anything. Not me, not our life, nothing. Kai's gaze shifted from Liam to Alara. It was cool, assessing. Unlike Liam's frantic energy, his was a calm, deep stillness that felt more dangerous. Alara felt a prickle of fear. Could he see through her? He'd always been observant in a way that made her feel uncomfortably transparent. The doctor said it's temporary, Liam barreled on, but she needs to be in a familiar, low-stress environment. But our apartment, it's just stressing her out more because she doesn't recognize it. Or me. He was digging his own grave with a silver shovel. So, what's the plan? Kai's voice was a low baritone, devoid of the emotion that was choking Liam. Liam took a deep, shaky breath. This was it. The moment of his grand, idiotic solution. He turned to Alara, his expression a mask of pained benevolence. Alara, honey, he began, his tone the one you'd use on a spooked animal. This is Kai. He's my best friend. And he's your boyfriend. The world didn't stop. It tilted. Sharply. Alara's carefully constructed blankness almost shattered. She had expected many things, more pleading, a call to her mother, a specialist, but not this. This was so catastrophically stupid, so cowardly, that it took every ounce of her willpower not to sit bolt upright and scream, Asterisk, are you out of your mind? Asterisk her eyes, wide with genuine shock now, flicked from Liam's desperate face to Kai's. Kai hadn't moved. His eyebrow, however, gave the slightest, most infinitesimal twitch upward. His stormy eyes held hers, and for a terrifying second, she thought she saw a flicker of something in their depths, amusement? Calculation? It was gone before she could identify it. Liam, mistaking her shock for confusion, plowed ahead. It's true. You and Kai, you've been crazy about each other for months now. It's been a little hard on me, to be honest, but your happiness is what matters. He was actually managing to look like a martyred saint. You've been staying at his place lately. It'll be more familiar for you. Less stressful. The sheer, unmitigated gall of the man was breathtaking. He wasn't just avoiding the hassle of a sick girlfriend, he was rewriting their entire history to dodge a moment of awkwardness and guilt, handing her off like a problematic parcel to the one person he thought was safe. Because everyone knew Kai Thorne was emotionally unavailable. He was a fortress. He wouldn't actually try anything. It was the perfect, pathetic solution for a perfect, pathetic man. Silence stretched in the room, thick and heavy. The hum of the lights was the only sound. Then, Kai moved. He took 2 slow steps toward the bed, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. He looked down at Alara, his gaze unwavering. It's true, he said, his voice flat, utterly devoid of the tenderness one would use with an amnesiac lover. But the words were there. He was playing along. Why? Why would the notoriously uncompromising Kai Thorne agree to such an absurd lie? Alara's mind raced, adapting her script to this shocking new plot twist. She let her lower lip tremble, her eyes searching his face as if looking for a ghost of a memory. You are? He gave a single, curt nod. I am. Liam let out a gust of relief so powerful he swayed on his feet. See? It's all going to be okay. Kai will take you home. You'll be comfortable there. It's for the best. Asterisk for the best. Asterisk the words echoed in the sterile room, a monument to his selfishness. Kai turned to Liam, his expression unreadable. I'll take her to my place. I'll handle it. Thanks, man. I owe you one, Liam said, clapping Kai on the shoulder. The gesture of brotherhood made Alara feel sick. I need to clear my head. It's a lot. Yes, Alara thought, her internal voice dripping with sarcasm. Asterisk it must be so difficult for you, having successfully pawned off your inconvenient girlfriend. Asterisk 20 minutes later, she was discharged. Kai silently took the small bag the nurse handed him, containing her phone and wallet. He didn't offer her his arm. He just stood by the door, a silent, imposing sentinel, waiting. She walked ahead of him out of the hospital, the automatic doors sliding open to reveal the cool, damp night. A sleek, black car idled at the curb, a far cry from Liam's flashy sports car. This vehicle was silent, powerful, and understated. Like its owner. Kai opened the passenger door for her. She slid in, the leather seats cool against her skin. The interior smelled of sandalwood and clean, cold air. He got in the driver's side, the door closing with a solid, expensive thunk. The silence in the car was absolute as he pulled away from the hospital. It was a different quality from the noisy silence with Liam. This was a quiet that felt observant. He drove with a focused precision, his eyes on the road. Alara stared out the window at the blurring lights of Viridia Bay, her heart thumping a wild, irregular rhythm against her ribs. What had she gotten herself into? She had wanted to punish Liam, to shake him up. She hadn't planned on being delivered into the hands of his enigmatic, and suddenly complicit, best friend. After 10 minutes, he spoke, his voice cutting through the quiet without warning. The lipstick on his collar, Kai said, his tone conversational, as if commenting on the weather. It was a poor choice of color for Chloe. It clashed with her complexion. Alara froze. Her blood ran cold. She didn't dare look at him. He'd seen it. He knew. And he'd said nothing. He was playing along, but he wasn't playing blind. The game had just become infinitely more complex, and the stakes had skyrocketed. She was no longer just fooling her negligent boyfriend, she was now in a precarious, unspoken alliance with a man who saw everything. And she had absolutely no idea what his endgame was. Kai Thorne's penthouse wasn't a home, it was a statement. A declaration of power, wealth, and severe, uncompromising taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows presented a breathtaking, postcard-perfect view of Viridia Bay's glittering skyline, but the interior itself was a study in monochrome minimalism. Polished concrete floors, a single, long sofa the color of charcoal, and a vast, empty dining table made of reclaimed driftwood. There were no photos, no knickknacks, no throw pillows. It was the kind of place that looked like it had been staged for a magazine shoot and then abandoned. It was also, Alara noted with a sinking feeling, utterly devoid of any trace of her. "You live here?" she asked, letting her voice sound small and lost, which wasn't difficult. The sheer, sterile expanse of the place was genuinely intimidating. Kai tossed his keys into a small ceramic bowl on a minimalist console table. The sound echoed in the vast space. "We do," he replied, his tone neutral. He was a far better actor than she'd given him credit for. There was no hesitation, no flicker of a lie in his stormy eyes. He moved through the space with the easy ownership of a man in his own domain, but his gaze kept returning to her, watching, always watching. The doctor said familiar surroundings would help, she ventured, playing her part. She gestured vaguely at the stark living room. "But this? I don't remember any of this." He stopped and looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, she felt utterly transparent. "Memory is a tricky thing," he said, his voice low. "It doesn't always latch onto places. Sometimes, it's the small things. The smell of coffee in the morning. The feel of a specific blanket." He walked over to a sleek, hidden kitchen panel and opened it, revealing a state-of-the-art coffee machine. "You take yours black. 1 sugar. You say it cuts the bitterness without the cowardice of cream." Alara's breath caught in her throat. It was true. It was a stupid, pretentious thing she'd once said to Liam, who had laughed and called her a coffee snob. How did Kai know that? Had Liam been sharing their private jokes? Before she could formulate a response, he was moving again. "Your room is this way." Asterisk your room. Asterisk not our room. The relief was so potent it made her knees weak. He led her down a hallway to a guest room. It was as impeccably decorated as the rest of the penthouse, a large bed with crisp white linens, a single abstract painting on the wall, another stunning view. It was also, like a high-end hotel room, completely impersonal. "The bathroom is through there. Fresh towels are in the cabinet." He paused at the door. "Get some rest. You've had a shock." He closed the door softly behind him, leaving her alone in the silent, beautiful cage. Alara stood in the center of the room, her arms wrapped around herself. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, hard lump of reality in its wake. She was here. In Kai Thorne's apartment. Pretending to be his amnesiac girlfriend while he pretended right back, for reasons she couldn't fathom. It was surreal. The events of the night crashed down on her, the cold dinner, the betrayal on social media, the fall, the hospital, Liam's catastrophic lie. A wave of exhaustion so profound it felt like a physical weight washed over her. She kicked off her shoes and fell onto the bed, the silk of her dress slithering against the cool linen. She just needed to close her eyes for a minute. Just 1 minute, asterisk 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 a sound jolted her awake. She didn't know how long she'd been out. The city lights still blazed outside the window, but the deep, velvet blackness of the sky suggested it was the dead of night. The room was pitch dark. Then she heard it again. Kai's voice. Muffled, but sharp. He was on the phone. Curiosity, that treacherous cat, got the better of her. She slid off the bed, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. She crept to the door and pressed her ear against the cool wood. Just keep her occupied for a week, man. It was Liam's voice, tinny and distorted through the phone speaker, but unmistakably his. He sounded relaxed. Almost jovial. I just need a break. A little breathing room. Alara's blood went cold. And Chloe provides that breathing room? Kai's voice was flat, devoid of judgment. A simple request for data. Liam let out a short, ugly laugh. She's uncomplicated. She doesn't expect, well, everything. She knows it's just fun. And she's been so understanding about this whole situation. Asterisk situation. Asterisk that's what she was. A situation. So you're using her amnesia as a vacation, Kai stated. It wasn't a question. Don't say it like that, Liam whined. It's a chance for both of us to reset. When she gets her memory back, I'll be refreshed. I'll be a better boyfriend. She'll see that. She loves me too much to stay mad forever. The arrogance of it stole the air from her lungs. He wasn't racked with guilt. He was relieved. Her tragic accident was a convenient excuse for him to play the field without the hassle of a breakup. Just keep an eye on her, Kai. You're the only one I trust with this. You don't even like her that much, so I know nothing will, happen. There was a beat of silence from Kai. It stretched just a second too long. Nothing will happen, Kai repeated, his voice a low, neutral murmur. I know. You're a fortress. Thanks, man. Seriously. I owe you. The call ended. Alara stood frozen, her ear still pressed to the door, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The playful, vengeful spark of her plan had been extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard ball of fury and hurt. This wasn't a game anymore. It was a war. And she had just been given a critical piece of intelligence. The enemy saw her as a temporary inconvenience, a problem to be managed. She needed water. Something to cool the fire in her veins. She waited a full minute, listening for any movement, then quietly opened the door and padded out into the dark living room. The open-plan space was lit only by the city glow, casting long, distorted shadows. She could make out Kai's form standing by the vast window, his back to her, a dark silhouette against the glittering tapestry of the city. He was perfectly still. She took a careful step, then another, heading towards the kitchen. Her bare foot brushed against a loose floorboard she hadn't noticed, and it let out a soft creak. Kai turned around instantly. His movement was fluid and silent, like a predator's. His face was in shadow, but she could feel his gaze on her. The floor is cold, he said, his voice cutting through the darkness. Why aren't you wearing shoes? Before she could answer, he was crossing the room. In 3 long strides, he was in front of her. He didn't ask. He simply bent down, slid one arm behind her back, the other under her knees, and scooped her up as if she weighed nothing. Alara gasped, her arms instinctively flying up to circle his neck. He was solid, warm. The sandalwood scent of him was everywhere. It was utterly disorienting. He carried her to the large charcoal sofa and deposited her gently onto the cushions. The leather was cool through the thin silk of her dress. I'm thirsty, she managed to whisper, her voice shaky. It wasn't an act. I'll get it for you. He went to the water dispenser, his movements economical and precise. He returned with a glass of cool water and sat beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He watched her as she drank, his eyes glinting in the semi-darkness. Are you feeling okay anywhere else? He asked, his tone laced with a concern that felt both genuine and performative. It was impossible to tell which was real. She shook her head after sipping the water, not trusting her voice. He reached out then, and with a startling tenderness, he brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek, tucking it behind her ear. His fingers were warm against her skin. She flinched, the gesture too intimate, too confusing. He leaned in slowly, his eyes on hers. She froze, thinking, this is it. The game is over. He's going to call my bluff. But he didn't. He simply pressed his lips to her forehead. The kiss was soft, dry, and lasted only a second, but it sent a jolt straight through her core. She blinked up at him, her mind a whirlwind. Liam told him not to touch me. He's crossing a line. His own line. He pulled back, his face unreadable in the shadows. It's okay, he murmured, his voice a low rumble. You don't remember. We'll take it slow. You'll get used to me again. He stood up and offered her his hand. Come on. Back to bed. She let him lead her back to the guest room, her mind reeling. Austin Rivers, it seemed, was also lying to his dear brother. But why? For his own amusement? For a chance to get back at Liam for some unseen slight? Or was there something else? As he closed the door, leaving her once again in the dark, Alara realized with a chilling clarity that she wasn't the only one playing a part in this twisted drama. She was sharing the stage with a master, and she had no idea what his next line would be. The text came from Kai the next morning, a simple, stark message on her phone, lunch at the Viridian Club. The crowd will be there. It's time. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cool, conditioned air of the penthouse ran down Alara's spine. The crowd. Liam's inner circle. The same people who had likely been at the Oculus bar last night, laughing while her risotto congealed. This was her debut. Her first test in the wild. She stood before the guest room's walk-in closet, which Kai had silently indicated was hers. It was filled with clothes, all in her size, all with the tag still on. Elegant, minimalist pieces in neutral tones. It was unnervingly thoughtful and deeply unsettling. When had he done this? How had he known? She selected a simple, sleeveless dress of a deep crimson crepe. It was a color of defiance, of passion, a far cry from the muted, wounded persona she was supposed to be projecting. Let them try to pity a woman in scarlet. Kai said nothing when she emerged, but his eyes did a slow, deliberate sweep from her head to her heels, and a flicker of something, approval, crossed his face before it shuddered again. The Viridian Club was a temple of old money and whispered power. The moment they stepped through the heavy oak doors, a hush fell over their particular corner of the sun-drenched dining room. It was as if someone had pressed a mute button on a soundtrack of clinking crystal and murmured gossip. Every head turned. Bastian Gray, resplendent in a floral waistcoat, had his fork hovering mid-air, his mouth a perfect O of delight. Others, the sons and daughters of Viridia's elite, stared with naked curiosity, their glances darting from Alara's composed face to the empty space beside them, clearly waiting for Liam. And then she saw them. At the best table, by the panoramic window overlooking the yacht club, sat Liam. And next to him, nestled so close their shoulders touched, was Chloe Dubois. Chloe's chrome-manicured hand was resting possessively on Liam's forearm, a perfect mirror of Bastian's screenshot. Liam's face was a thundercloud of conflicting emotions, guilt, shock, and a simmering anger that seemed directed at Kai. Chloe, however, looked like the cat that got the canary, the cream, and the keys to the dairy. Kai. Darling, she trilled, her voice cutting through the silence. And you brought poor Alara. What a brave face she's putting on. Kai's hand found the small of Alara's back, a firm, warm pressure that was both a guide and a claim. He led her to the table, pulling out a chair for her directly opposite Liam and Chloe. Alara, darling, do you remember me? Chloe leaned forward, her expression one of syrupy concern. We were such good friends. I'm just heartbroken for you. Alara looked at her, at the girl who had spent years orbiting their group, offering a sympathetic ear to Liam about how high-maintenance Alara was, and she let her face remain a polite, vacant mask. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft. "I don't." "Oh, don't you worry about a thing," Chloe chirped, reclaiming her grip on Liam's arm. "We're all here for you. And for Liam, of course. It's been so hard on him." Liam looked like he was swallowing glass. "Chloe's been a great support," he forced out, his eyes pleading with Alara to remember, to save him from this hell of his own making. The lunch was a torturous pantomime. Bastian, ever the dramaturge, watched the entire scene with gleeful eyes, occasionally throwing out leading questions like, "Kai, old boy, is it terribly awkward playing nursemaid? You were always so independent." To which Kai would only offer a non-committal hum, his attention seemingly focused on ensuring Alara's water glass was always full. It was during a lull that Bastian, with a devilish grin, proposed a game. Truth or dare is so juvenile. "Let's play spin the bottle, consequences. Loser of the round has to kiss someone at the table for a full 30 seconds. The bottle, an empty vintage champagne one, spun with a menacing whir. Alara watched its neck slow, pass over a panicked Liam, over a smug Chloe, and come to a stop, pointing directly at her. A fresh, eager silence blanketed the table. All eyes were on her. The unspoken question hung in the air, thick as the club cigar smoke from the adjacent room. Who would the amnesiac girl kiss? The man she instinctively should remember? Or the man she'd been told was her lover? Liam looked physically ill, his eyes wide with a silent, desperate warning. Asterisk don't. Asterisk he shifted uncomfortably, as if ready to jump up and stop her. Chloe's grip on his arm tightened, her smile brittle. Kai, beside her, had gone very still. She could feel the tension radiating from him, a coiled spring. With a smile that was all sweet innocence, Alara turned to him. "Well," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the quiet. "I suppose I should kiss my boyfriend. Shall we?" The reaction was instantaneous. A collective, sharp intake of breath. Bastian looked like all his Christmases had come at once. Chloe's jaw tightened. And Liam? Liam looked as if he'd been physically struck, his face draining of all color. Kai's stillness broke. He turned to face her fully, his stormy eyes searching hers for a brief, electric moment. Then, a slow, dangerous smile touched his lips, the first real, unguarded expression she'd seen from him. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger, sharper, and utterly devastating. "We shall," he said, his voice a low promise. He didn't give her time to reconsider. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch surprisingly gentle, and leaned in. The first touch of his lips was soft, a question. But the moment she didn't pull away, the moment her hands came up to rest on his shoulders, the kiss changed. It deepened, becoming something less of a performance and more of a conquest. It was intense, possessive, and startlingly skillful. It was nothing like Liam's familiar, practiced kisses. This was all new territory, a dark, thrilling wilderness. The world shrank to the feel of his mouth on hers, the scent of sandalwood, the faint sound of someone, Bastian, probably, whistling lowly. She was aware of the 30-second countdown only as a distant echo. When he finally pulled away, it was gradual, his forehead resting against hers for a fleeting second before he straightened up. Her lips felt swollen. Her heart was hammering. She dared a glance around the table. The silence was no longer eager, it was stunned. They had expected her to falter, to gravitate towards Liam. They had not expected this display of passion with the man they all knew as the unapproachable Kai Thorne. They had watched Liam kiss other women, but seeing her kiss another man, a man like Kai, was a paradigm shift they hadn't been prepared for. Kai gently wiped a trace of moisture from the corner of her mouth with his thumb, his eyes holding hers. "What's wrong with everyone?" he asked the table, his tone lightly amused. "It was just a game." "Alara's certainly not shy with her boyfriend," Chloe sneered, her voice tight, the mockery now laced with a sharp, personal venom. "Even with amnesia." But the comment fell flat. The dynamic had irrevocably shifted. The power was no longer with the pitying spectators or the cheating boyfriend. It was with the two of them, sitting together, a united front in a war no one else knew they were fighting. Liam didn't say another word for the rest of the lunch. He just stared at his plate, his knuckles white as he gripped his fork, the image of her wrapped around Kai seared into his mind. As they stood to leave, Kai's hand returned to the small of her back, a brand of ownership and protection. He led her out of the club, leaving the stunned silence in their wake. In the car, the quiet was different. It was charged, thick with the ghost of the kiss. Alara stared out the window, her mind a riot. She had meant it as a move in their game, a public slap to Liam's face. But the kiss had felt dangerously real. And as Kai drove, his profile stern and focused once more, she realized the most terrifying part of all. A part of her, a treacherous, hidden part, had already started to forget it was just an act. The silence in the car after the club was a living thing, thick and pulsating with the ghost of the kiss. Alara kept her face turned resolutely towards the window, watching the sleek, rain-slicked streets of Viridia Bay blur past. Her lips still tingled, a persistent, warm reminder of the 30 seconds that had upended the entire game. It wasn't supposed to feel like that. It was supposed to be a tactic, a piece of theater. It wasn't supposed to steal the air from her lungs and make her fingers tremble with something that felt dangerously like want. Kai drove with his usual focused intensity, but the set of his jaw seemed tighter, the knuckles of his hands on the steering wheel a shade wider. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The memory of the kiss filled the space between them, a shared secret that was far more intimate than the act itself. Back at the penthouse, the sterility of the place felt different. It was no longer just a stage set, it had become the backdrop for a moment that had shaken them both. Alara fled to the guest room under the pretense of a headache, closing the door and leaning against it, her heart still performing a frantic tap dance against her ribs. She needed a distraction. She needed to remember why she was here. Not for Kai's stormy eyes or his disconcertingly skilled mouth, but for revenge on the man who had discarded her so easily. As if summoned by her thoughts, her phone buzzed. Liam. She let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. On the fourth ring, she took a steadying breath and answered, her voice carefully neutral. Hello? Alara. His voice was strained, ragged. What the hell was that? What was what? She asked, injecting a note of innocent confusion. That display with Kai. At the club. Oh, she said, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. The game. You were there. I lost. The punishment was to kiss someone. So I kissed my boyfriend. She paused, then added, was that not the right thing to do? She could almost hear him grinding his teeth through the phone. He's not. I mean, it's just, he sputtered, trapped in the cage of his own lie. It was too much, Alara. It looked real. Well, I don't know what's real, do I? She replied softly, twisting the knife with her helplessness. You all tell me he's my boyfriend. He acts like my boyfriend. So I acted like his girlfriend. I'm just trying to do what feels familiar. There was a long, heavy silence. When he spoke again, his voice was low and desperate. Come home, Alara. Please. This was a mistake. I'll explain everything. Just come back to me. For a single, fleeting moment, the old Alara, the one who had loved him for 5 years, twinged with a familiar ache. But then she saw it again, the lipstick on his collar, the casual lie in his text, his relieved voice on the phone with Kai asking for a break. I am home, she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hand. Kai said I live here with him. And it feels safe here. It was the truest thing she'd said all day. She ended the call before he could respond, dropping the phone onto the bed as if it had burned her. The confrontation had left her feeling raw and agitated. The carefully constructed walls of her amnesia felt thin, fragile. She needed to move, to do something with the restless energy coursing through her. She left her room and wandered into the living area. Kai was nowhere to be seen. A door down the hall, slightly ajar, revealed a sliver of a room she hadn't entered, his home office. The storm from outside was finally breaking, the sky darkening to a bruised purple, and a low rumble of thunder echoed over the bay. Driven by a curiosity she couldn't suppress, she pushed the door open. It was as meticulously organized as the rest of the penthouse. A large, reclaimed wood desk held a single monitor and a sleek laptop. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes on architecture and finance. But it was the large, flat portfolio case leaning against the far wall that caught her eye. It was out of place, too personal for this sterile space. Another roll of thunder, closer this time. The first heavy drops of rain began to splatter against the floor-to-ceiling window in the office. Her heart hammered a guilty rhythm. This was a violation. This was his private space. But the memory of Liam's voice, you don't even like her that much, pushed her forward. She needed to understand Kai's angle. What was he getting out of this? Her fingers trembled as she undid the leather ties of the portfolio. She laid it flat on the rug and lifted the cover. And her world stopped. It wasn't filled with architectural blueprints or financial charts. It was filled with her. Page after page, in exquisite, painstaking detail, were pencil sketches of her face. Not photographs, not stolen moments, but drawings born from memory. Her laughing, her head thrown back. Her concentrating, biting her lower lip as she worked on a design. Her looking out a window, a pensive, sad expression she thought she'd hidden from the world. He had captured the slight crookedness of her smile, the way one eyebrow arched higher than the other when she was skeptical, the specific fall of her hair across her cheek. These weren't the drawings of a man who didn't like her that much. They were the works of a man who had studied her, who had memorized the cartography of her face with an intensity that was borderline obsessive. The rain was falling in sheets now, a deafening roar against the glass. But Alara heard none of it. She was lost in the graphite lines, in the shocking, undeniable evidence of a secret love she had never suspected. Find what you were looking for? His voice, quiet and cold, cut through the storm's cacophony. She jerked her head up, scrambling backward on the rug. He stood in the doorway, his silhouette dark and imposing against the hall light. His face was in shadow, but she could feel the anger radiating from him. Kai, I'm sorry, you what? He took a step into the room, and the temperature seemed to drop. You thought you'd snoop? See what the enigmatic Kai Thorne is really about? His voice was a low, dangerous whip. Did you think you'd find a dossier on your condition? Notes on how to manage you? No, or were you looking for leverage? He took another step, his eyes blazing in the dim light. Something to use against me when this little charade of yours is over? The word hung in the air between them. Charade. He knew. He had always known. The pretense shattered. The carefully built wall of her amnesia crumbled to dust. There was no point in denying it. How long, she whispered, her voice raw. From the moment you opened your eyes in that hospital room, he said, his tone flat, final. You're a terrible liar, Alara. Your eyes give you away. They always have. The confession, his and hers, left them standing in a new, terrifying landscape. The game was over. This was something else entirely. Thunder cracked directly overhead, a sound so violent it shook the windows. The lights in the penthouse flickered, dimmed, and then went out, plunging them into a deep, resonant darkness broken only by the frantic pulse of the storm. She could hear his breathing, could feel his presence just feet away. The air was charged, electric with the storm and with the truth that now lay bare between them. Why, she asked into the darkness, her voice small. Why did you play along? For a long moment, there was only the sound of the rain. Then, she heard him move. Not towards the door, but towards her. His form was a darker shadow in the blackness, stopping just in front of her. You know why, he said, his voice a rough whisper that was nearly swallowed by the storm. And in the profound darkness, with the evidence of his secret obsession scattered at her feet, she realized that she did. The darkness was absolute, a velvet shroud that amplified every sound. The frantic drumming of the rain. The ragged cadence of her own breathing. And his, a low, steady rhythm just a few feet away. You know why. The three words hung in the charged air, simple, devastating, and utterly undeniable. The portfolio at her feet was not just a collection of drawings, it was a confession. A silent, years-long declaration she had been too blind to see. All those times she'd written off his intense stares as disapproval, his quiet presence as aloofness, it had been the opposite. He had been watching. He had been memorizing. The storm inside her mirrored the one raging outside. The carefully constructed fortress of her revenge, her righteous anger at Liam, felt suddenly small and childish in the face of this. She had been playing checkers while Kai had been playing a long, silent game of chess. How long, she asked again, her voice a broken whisper, the question now meaning something entirely different. She heard him shift in the darkness. Does it matter? It matters to me. A sigh, barely audible over the rain. The company picnic. 4 years ago. The memory surfaced through the shock, crisp and clear. Liam had been late, as usual. She'd been standing alone near the punch bowl, feeling awkward and out of place among the polished executives. Kai had been there, leaning against a tree, a silent observer. She'd marched up to him, tired of being ignored, and launched into a passionate, slightly wine-fueled critique of the firm's new headquarters design, calling it soulless and imposing. He hadn't argued. He'd just listened, his stormy eyes fixed on her with an unnerving intensity, until she'd run out of steam. Then, a corner of his mouth had quirked up. "Most people just talk about the weather," he'd said. She'd laughed, a real, unguarded laugh, and told him the weather was boring. She had forgotten that moment the next day. He, apparently, had built a shrine to it. "You never said anything," she breathed. "You were with my best friend," he replied, his voice stripped of all its usual coolness, leaving only a raw, stark truth. "What was I supposed to say?" The lights flickered once, twice, then surged back on, the sudden brightness of physical assault. She blinked, her eyes adjusting to the revelation as much as the light. He was standing right in front of her. The anger was gone from his face, replaced by a weary resignation. His gaze dropped to the open portfolio, to the hundreds of versions of her staring up from the floor. There was no point in hiding it now. "Liam," she started, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. "Is a fool," Kai finished, his voice regaining a sliver of its steel. "A fool who had a treasure and treated it like a burden. A fool who handed that treasure to me to hold, thinking I was a safe, emotionless vault." He took a final step, closing the distance between them. He didn't touch her, but his proximity was a physical force. He was wrong. Alara's heart was a wild thing in her chest. The game had been obliterated. The pretense was gone. They were just a man and a woman standing in a stormlit room, with a history of secret longing and a present built on a lie. "What happens now?" she whispered, looking up at him, truly seeing him for the first time, not as Liam's aloof friend, not as her temporary handler, but as Kai. The man who loved her. "That," he said, his eyes searching hers, "is up to you." He knelt down, not breaking eye contact, and began carefully, reverently, gathering the scattered drawings and placing them back into the portfolio. It was a quiet, intimate act, a restoration of order to the chaos he had just unleashed. "The Amnesia," she began, unsure how to navigate this new territory, "is a useful fiction," he said, tying the leather cords with a precise, final motion. He stood, holding the portfolio. "It keeps Liam at bay. It gives you space. It gives us space. We can continue it, or we can end it. Your choice." He was giving her the reins. After all his manipulation, his secret observations, his complicity in the lie, he was finally offering her a choice. The penthouse felt different. The sterile minimalism was no longer a cage, it was a blank canvas. The view of the storm-swept bay was no longer a pretty picture, it was the world being washed clean. "He called me," she said, the words tumbling out. "Liam." He said the kiss was too much. "He asked me to come home." Kai went very still. The air tightened. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him I was home." The silence that followed was profound, but it was a different silence than before. It was not the silence of a standoff, but the silence of a pact being sealed. A slow, devastating smile spread across Kai's face, a real one that reached his eyes, turning them from a winter storm to a summer sky after the rain. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. "Good," he said, the single word laden with a universe of meaning. He placed the portfolio back against the wall, then turned to her. He didn't move to kiss her again. He simply looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time, too. "So," he said, his voice back to its low, steady rumble, but with a new warmth threading through it. "Now that we've dispensed with the lies, are you hungry? I never got to eat at that farce of a lunch." The mundane question, asked in the wake of such seismic revelations, was so absurd it broke the tension. A genuine laugh bubbled up from Alara's chest, light and free. "Starving?" He nodded. "I'll order from that Italian place you like. The one with the truffle gnocchi Liam always said was too heavy." Another detail he'd stored away. Another small rebellion. As he walked out to the living room to find his phone, Alara looked around the office. It was the same room, but everything had changed. The man she had feared was an adversary had just revealed himself as her most devoted ally. The revenge plot against Liam was now secondary, it was the foundation, not the structure. She was no longer building a case against her old life, she was, for the first time, with a shocking and terrifying clarity, considering the blueprints for a new one. And the architect was a man who had, quite literally, been drawing them for years. The truffle gnocchi was, in fact, divine. They ate at the vast, empty dining table, the storm having subsided to a soft, steady patter against the glass. The conversation was stilted at first, a series of careful probes and hesitant answers, like two diplomats from newly allied nations who didn't yet know the borders. He told her about the first sketch, the one from the picnic, drawn from memory the moment he got home, frustrated that he couldn't capture the exact way the sunlight had caught the gold in her hair. She told him about the night of the fall, the cold risotto, the lipstick stain, the sheer, galvanizing fury that had birthed her terrible, wonderful idea. It was a confession booth without the screen, a mutual laying down of arms. The next few days passed in a strange, liminal space. The amnesia remained their official story, a shield they both maintained. Liam called incessantly, his messages evolving from pleading to demanding. Kai would hand her his phone, a wry smile on his face, as Liam's name flashed on the screen. Your boyfriend, he'd say, the title now a private joke that sent a thrill through her. They fell into a rhythm. Alara worked from the penthouse, her design projects spread across the driftwood table. Kai worked from his office, the door now consistently open. They moved around each other with a new, quiet awareness. He'd make her coffee, black with one sugar, without being asked. She'd order lunch, remembering his surprising fondness for spicy Thai food. It was a dance of observation and reciprocation, a real relationship being built on the skeleton of a fake one. It was Bastian, of course, who shattered the peace with a glitter bomb of an invitation. Bastian ***, darlings. The moment has arrived. My gallery is hosting a neo-romanticism exhibit. It's all passion and drama. Very you two lately. Be there. Black tie. And Alara, darling, wear something stunning. I expect a performance. The message was a gauntlet thrown. It was their first major public appearance since the kiss. The night of the gallery opening, Alara stood before the full-length mirror in a gown Kai had produced from the mysterious, perfectly stocked closet. It was a column of liquid midnight, backless, with a delicate, intricate harness of silver threads that crisscrossed her spine. It was bold. It was architectural. It was utterly Kai. When she walked out, he was waiting in the living room, adjusting the cufflinks on his tuxedo. He looked up, and his breath audibly caught. The storm in his eyes stilled into something odd and possessive. You look, he began, then seemed to discard a dozen words before settling on, like you're coming home. The gallery was a whirl of champagne, avant-garde art, and Viridia's elite. The moment they entered, hands linked, a ripple went through the crowd. They were the main attraction. Bastian swooped in, kissing the air beside their cheeks. The power couple arrives. Look at you. The Ice King and his fiery amnesiac queen. It's poetry. Alara's professional eye was drawn to the art, dramatic, sweeping canvases of entangled figures and turbulent skies. But her social awareness was fixed on the undercurrents. She saw Chloe, in a dress of aggressive fuchsia, shooting daggers at her from across the room. And she saw Liam. He was standing by a massive painting of a storm-tossed sea, a glass of whiskey clutched in his hand, his face a mask of tortured gloom. He looked like he'd stepped out of one of the darker canvases. For an hour, Alara and Kai navigated the room, a united front. He stayed by her side, his hand a constant, warm pressure on the small of her back, a silent anchor in the sea of curious stares and whispered speculation. She played her part flawlessly, leaning into him, laughing at his dry comments, letting her fingers linger on his arm. She was so immersed in the performance that she didn't see Liam approaching until he was right in front of them, his eyes bloodshot. Alara. We need to talk. Alone. His voice was too loud, cutting through the cultured murmur of the crowd. Kai's body went rigid beside her. This isn't the time or place, Liam. I wasn't talking to you, Liam snarled, his gaze fixed on Alara with a desperate intensity. This is between me and my girlfriend. A hush fell over their immediate vicinity. Chloe was watching, her face alight with vicious anticipation. Alara felt a cold calm settle over her. This was it. The moment of truth he kept demanding. Liam, she said, her voice clear and carrying. I don't know what you're talking about. My boyfriend is right here. The words, delivered with such placid confusion, were a slap. Liam flinched as if struck. The carefully constructed dam of his patience broke. "Stop it," he roared, drawing every eye in the gallery. "Just stop this fucking charade. You remember. I know you do." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in. "You love me. We've been together for 5 years. This with him," he jerked his head toward Kai, his expression one of pure contempt. "It's a lie. A sick game you're playing to punish me." Kai's hand closed over Liam's wrist, his grip like iron. "Let her go. Now." Liam ignored him, his eyes pleading with Alara. "I was wrong, okay? I was a fool. Chloe meant nothing. It's you, it's always been you." His voice cracked. "I bought a ring, Alara. I was going to propose after your big award ceremony next month. I have it right here." He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a small, velvet box. He dropped to one knee right there on the polished gallery floor, in front of the tangled, romanticized figures in the paintings and their stunned, real-life audience. A collective gasp swept through the room. Cameras' phones were raised. Bastian looked like he was about to spontaneously combust with delight. "Alara Vance," Liam proclaimed, his voice trembling with earnest, performative passion. "I love you. I'm sorry. Please, come back to me. Marry me." He opened the box. The ring was large, ostentatious, and cold. A perfect diamond for a perfect, hollow performance. It was everything he thought she should want. Every single person in the gallery held their breath. This was the climax. The amnesiac heroine, confronted with her past, her true love on his knees. It was a scene straight from a movie. Alara looked down at him, at the man who had lied, who had handed her off, who was now causing a scene to reclaim what he saw as his property. She looked at his desperate, handsome face, and she felt nothing but a profound, bone-deep pity. She slowly, deliberately, pulled her arm from Kai's supportive grip. She took a small step forward, towards the kneeling Liam. Hope flared in his eyes. She didn't look at the ring. She looked directly at him, and she let every vestige of the confused, amnesiac girl fall away from her face. Her expression was one of crystal clear, icy clarity. "I never lost my memory, Liam." The silence in the gallery was so absolute you could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass across the room. Liam's face went slack with disbelief. "What?" "That night, at the hospital," she continued, her voice calm and resonant. "I asked you who you were. And you were so desperate to avoid the consequences of your own actions, so eager to get back to your uncomplicated fun with Chloe, that your brilliant solution was to tell me the man standing silently in the corner, your best friend, was my boyfriend." She glanced back at Kai, who was watching her with an expression of fierce, unwavering pride. "You handed me to him like a problem you couldn't be bothered to solve. You asked him to keep me occupied while you took a break from our life." She turned her gaze back to Liam, who was still on his knees, his face a grotesque mask of dawning horror. The ring box shook in his hand. "So, no," she said, the finality in her voice ringing through the grand space. "I will not marry you. The only thing I want from you now is to never, ever speak to me again." She turned her back on him, on the gaping crowd, on the shattered remains of her old life. She walked the 2 steps back to Kai, whose arm immediately came around her, solid and real. The spell broke. The gallery erupted into a cacophony of whispers and exclamations. Liam remained on the floor, a ruined prince in a puddle of his own making, the ungiven ring a monument to his folly. As Kai led her through the parted crowd, toward the exit, Alara didn't look back. The performance was over. The truth was out. And for the first time in years, she was walking freely into her future, her hand firmly held by the man who had loved her in the shadows, and now, finally, in the blinding light. The drive back to the penthouse was silent, but this time, the quiet was a balm. It wasn't the charged, observant silence of their first car ride together, nor the tense, post-kiss confusion of the second. This was the deep, exhausted silence of a battle ended. Alara leaned her head against the cool window, watching the city lights streak by, feeling strangely weightless. She had shed the armor of her amnesia and the burden of Liam's expectations in one fell swoop. All that was left was the raw, unvarnished truth of herself, sitting next to the man who had known it all along. Kai didn't speak. He simply reached across the console, his fingers finding hers and lacing through them. His grip was firm, grounding. He didn't offer platitudes or try to dissect the event. He just held her hand, a silent acknowledgement of the earthquake they had just unleashed together. When they stepped out of the elevator into the penthouse, the familiar sterile environment felt different yet again. It was no longer a stage or a cage, it was a sanctuary. The first thing Kai did was walk to the console table, pick up the ceramic bowl, and empty Liam's keys into the trash with a final, metallic clatter. The gesture was small, but its symbolism was immense. The last physical token of that life was gone. Alara toed off her heels, the cool concrete a relief against her soles. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a bone-deep weariness in its wake. She stood in the middle of the living room, suddenly unsure of what to do next. The script was gone. The performance was over. I think, she said, her voice husky, I could sleep for a week. Kai nodded, his eyes soft in the dimmed downlights. Go. Get some rest. She turned toward the guest room, then paused. That room, with its impersonal hotel room perfection, belonged to the amnesiac. It wasn't hers anymore. She wasn't a guest in this story. She turned back. Kai? He was halfway to the kitchen, presumably to get a glass of water. He stopped and looked at her. The guest room, she began, her courage faltering for a second. It doesn't feel right. Not tonight. He understood immediately. He didn't smile, but his entire posture softened. He gestured with his head toward the other end of the hallway, toward the master suite, a place she had never been. My room is through there. If you'd like. She nodded, a simple, decisive motion. She used his bathroom, finding a new toothbrush still in its packaging in a drawer. When she emerged, wearing one of his soft, gray t-shirts that fell to her mid-thigh, he was already in bed, the sheets pulled up to his waist. The lights were off, the room illuminated only by the eternal glow of the city. He had left a generous space on the other side of the king-sized bed for her. She slipped in beside him. The sheets were cool, crisp linen. They lay on their backs, side by side, not touching, staring up at the shadowed ceiling. The events of the night replayed in her mind like a surreal film, Liam's desperate face, the gasp of the crowd, the cold weight of the ring box in her mind's eye. He was really going to propose, she whispered into the darkness, the statement hanging there, absurd and tragic. He was, Kai's voice was a low rumble beside her. But not for the right reasons. It was a last-ditch effort to reclaim his narrative. To own you again. Own you. The words were harsh, but they rang true. Liam's love had always carried the faint scent of ownership. Did you know? She asked. About the ring? I suspected. He'd been acting strangely, making secretive calls. I thought it was about Chloe. It never occurred to me he'd be that foolish. A small, wry smile touched her lips. Foolish was the kindest word for it. They lapsed back into silence. It was comfortable, the easy quiet of two people who had run out of lies to tell. After a long while, she felt him shift onto his side to face her. She turned her head on the pillow to meet his gaze. In the dim light, his features were all sharp planes and soft shadows. The portfolio, she said, the question that had been burning in her since the blackout finally finding its voice. All those drawings, it wasn't just about the picnic, was it? He was silent for a moment, his eyes searching hers. No, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. It was the way you always tucked your hair behind your ear when you were nervous. The specific way you'd frown at your screen when a design wasn't working. The sound of your laugh from across a room. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of her eyebrow, a gesture so intimate it made her breath catch. It was the fact that you were the most vibrant thing in any room you walked into, and you never even seemed to know it. Liam was so busy trying to dim you, to make you fit into his world, that he never saw he was trying to extinguish the sun. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of a profound, overwhelming sense of being seen. For years, she had felt herself shrinking, sanding down her own edges to fit the space Liam had allotted for her. Kai hadn't just been watching, he'd been cataloging every single part of her she'd been taught to hide. She reached up and covered his hand with hers, pressing it against her cheek. All this time, she breathed. I thought you disliked me. A faint, self-deprecating smile touched his lips. Disliking you was the only safe option. The only way to survive being near you. He leaned in then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. She met him halfway. This kiss was nothing like the one at the club. That had been a declaration of war, all fire and possession. This was a peace treaty. It was soft, searching, and devastatingly tender. It was a kiss of hello, of finally, of here I am. It tasted of truth and relief and a future she had never dared to imagine. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "Elara," he murmured, her name a prayer on his lips. She didn't answer with words. She simply shifted closer, curling into his side, her head finding its place on his chest. His arm came around her, holding her tightly against him, his chin resting on the top of her head. His heart beat a steady, strong rhythm under her ear, a lullaby more comforting than any she had ever known. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was the feeling of his fingers gently stroking her hair, and the absolute, unshakable certainty that for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The performance was over. This was real. Elara woke to the feeling of warmth and the steady, solid rhythm of a heartbeat beneath her ear. For a disorienting second, she didn't know where she was. Then, it all flooded back, the gallery, the ring, the truth, and the devastating tenderness of the night before. She was in Kai's bed. In his arms. She didn't move, savoring the novel sensation. Sunlight, pale and golden, streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting stripes across the rumpled linen sheets. Kai was still asleep, his face relaxed in a way she had never seen. The usual stern lines were smoothed away, making him look younger, almost vulnerable. One arm was draped possessively over her waist, his hand splayed against the small of her back. This was real. This was happening. Carefully, so as not to wake him, she extracted herself and padded out to the kitchen. The penthouse in the morning light felt different. The minimalist decor no longer seemed sterile, but serene. She found the coffee machine and made 2 cups, the rich, dark aroma filling the space. It felt domestic. A simple, profound act she had performed 1,000 times in her old life, but here, it felt like a declaration. She was standing by the window, cradling her mug and looking out at the sun-drenched bay, when her phone began to vibrate on the countertop. Not a call, but a relentless, chattering cascade of notifications. Social media tags. Text messages. Missed call alerts from numbers she didn't recognize. The outside world was crashing in. Hesitantly, she picked it up. A headline from a society blog made her blood run cold: Sterling heir's humiliation, Amnesia a ruse and shocking gallery rejection. There were pictures. Liam on his knees, his face a mask of anguish. Her, backlit and fierce, delivering her final lines. Kai, a stoic pillar of support beside her. The comments were a wildfire of speculation, schadenfreude, and outright vitriol. She was called a calculating bitch, a social climber, a heartless manipulator. Liam was painted as a tragic, betrayed hero. Kai was the enigmatic, home-wrecking best friend. Her hand trembled, sloshing coffee onto the pristine concrete floor. "Don't." Kai's voice was rough with sleep. He stood in the doorway to the hallway, dressed only in a pair of low-slung sweatpants, his hair tousled. He walked over, took the phone from her shaking hand, and placed it face down on the counter without even looking at the screen. "They don't matter," he said, his voice firm. He took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him, to see the certainty in his eyes. "None of them matter." "It's a circus," she whispered, her voice thick. "They're tearing me apart. They're bored, rich people with nothing better to do than feast on drama. Let them choke on it." He wiped a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You were magnificent last night. You were brave and true. That's the only thing that's real." He was her anchor in the suddenly churning sea. She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his unwavering calm. The peace, however, was fragile. Her work phone rang next, her actual boss, not a client. His tone was strained, concerned. "Elara, I've seen the news. The Henderson account is getting nervous. They're a very family values brand. This sort of publicity is making them twitchy." The consequences were no longer just social. They were professional. Her career, the one thing that had always been solely hers, was now under threat because of the mess she had orchestrated. Kai listened, his expression darkening. When she hung up, looking defeated, he simply said, "Give me the number of your most skittish client." "What? Why?" "Just trust me." Skeptical, she relayed the information. He made a call, not on his phone, but on the penthouse's landline, putting it on speaker. Andrew? Kai Thorne. His voice was no longer the one he used with her, it was the voice of a man who closed multi-million-dollar deals before breakfast. Cold, confident, and utterly commanding. I'm calling about Alara Vance. I understand there's some concern about negative press. A nervous mumble came from the other end. Let me be clear, Kai continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. Any brand would be fortunate to have her talent. The press you're referring to is the result of her extricating herself from a toxic, dishonest relationship with a man who was unfaithful. Her integrity and strength in doing so are assets, not liabilities. My firm, Thorne Holdings, is prepared to offer a significant endorsement deal to any client who stands by her during this time. Conversely, we will be re-evaluating our partnerships with those who lack such foresight. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a rapid, fawning assurance that of course they supported Alara, her work was impeccable, and they looked forward to continuing their collaboration. Kai ended the call and looked at her. Alara stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. You can't just threaten my clients with your financial empire. I didn't threaten, he corrected, a ghost of a smile on his lips. I incentivized. There's a difference. And your job is safe. It was a display of power so effortless, so absolute, it was dizzying. Liam had always seen her career as a cute hobby. Kai had just gone to war for it. The final intrusion came around noon. The intercom buzzed. It was the concierge. Mr. Thorne, a Mr. Liam Sterling is here. He's quite insistent. Kai's eyes met Alara's. Tell him he is not welcome here, he said into the speaker, his voice cold. I tried, sir. He's refusing to leave. He says he'll wait in the lobby all day if he has to. Alara felt a surge of panic, then a slower, colder wave of resolve. She couldn't hide forever. She walked to the intercom and pressed the button. Send him up. Kai looked at her, a question in his eyes. It's time, she said, her voice steady. This ends now. For good. When the elevator door slid open, Liam looked like he hadn't slept. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes haunted. He strode into the penthouse, his gaze sweeping over the space before landing on Alara, who stood beside Kai, her hand finding his. You, Liam spat, pointing a shaking finger at Kai. You planned this. You saw your opening and you took it. You stole her from me. No one stole me, Liam, Alara said, her voice calm but firm. You gave me away. You handed me my walking papers in that hospital room because I was an inconvenience. You don't get to be angry that I actually walked. I love you, he shouted, the sound raw and desperate in the quiet space. You love the idea of me, she countered, her heart a steady, unyielding drum in her chest. The version that was convenient for you. The one who didn't make waves. But I'm not her anymore. I haven't been for a long time. She took a step forward, her eyes holding his, no longer with anger, but with a final, pitying clarity. It's over. There is no grand gesture you can make, no scene you can cause, that will change that. You need to leave. And you need to leave us alone. Liam looked from her resolute face to Kai's impassive one. He saw the united front, the unbreakable bond that his own cowardice had forged. The fight drained out of him, leaving only a hollow shell of a man. He gave a slow, broken nod, turned, and walked back into the elevator without another word. The doors closed, and the penthouse was silent once more. Alara let out a long, shaky breath. The last ghost had been exorcised. Kai came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder. Are you okay? She leaned into his strength, watching the elevator numbers descend until they disappeared. The public scrutiny, the professional threats, the final, pathetic confrontation, it had all crashed against them, and they were still standing. Together. She turned in his arms and looked up at him, seeing the man who had loved her in secret, defended her in public, and was now building a fortress of quiet certainty around her. Yes, she said, and for the first time that day, she truly meant it. I think I finally am. The silence that followed Liam's departure was different from all the others. It was not the silence of tension, or secrets, or performance. It was the deep, clean silence of a field after a wildfire, scorched and clear, ready for new growth. The air in the penthouse felt lighter, as if the very molecules had been rearranged. Alara stood for a long moment, just breathing, feeling the solid, steady presence of Kai at her back. The frantic energy of the morning, the media storm, the professional threats, the final confrontation, had evaporated, leaving a profound exhaustion in its wake, but also a crystalline sense of peace. "It's really over," she whispered, the words not a question, but a confirmation. Kai turned her in his arms, his hands resting on her hips. "It was over the moment he chose a lie over you in that hospital," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "Everything since has just been the debris settling." He was right. The grand, dramatic finale at the gallery, the online furor, Liam's desperate plea, it was all just noise. The core of it, the essential truth, had been decided weeks ago in a sterile room under fluorescent lights. "I'm tired of talking about him," she said, a weary smile touching her lips. "I'm tired of thinking about him. I don't want him taking up any more space in this." She gestured between them, the word "our" feeling new and daring on her tongue. A slow, genuine smile spread across Kai's face, the kind that still had the power to steal her breath. "Then we're done." He leaned forward and kissed her, a soft, sealing kiss that tasted of closure and a new beginning. "Come on. I'm making you a proper breakfast. And then, we are going to do something entirely for us." An hour later, fortified by omelets and strong coffee, he led her back into his office. Her heart gave a nervous flutter. This room, with its portfolio of secrets, was the epicenter of their earthquake. But he walked past the portfolio. He went to a large, flat drawer beneath the bookshelves and pulled it open. Inside were not loose sheets, but a large, leather-bound sketchbook. He carried it to the desk and opened it. "You asked me to paint you," he said, his voice low. "I'm an architect, not a painter. But I can show you this." The first page was not a sketch of her face. It was a floor plan. Alara leaned closer, her designer's eye immediately recognizing the elegant, efficient lines. It was a house. A beautiful, modern, yet strangely warm house, designed around a central courtyard with a large, ancient-looking tree. "What is this?" she asked, her fingers hovering over the paper. "A project," he said, his gaze intent on her face. "A personal one." She turned the page. Elevations. The house was all clean angles and vast glass, but with a sloping, living roof and a wraparound porch she'd once mentioned in passing, years ago, saying she'd always wanted a place to watch the rain. She turned another page. Interior perspectives. A sun-drenched studio with north-facing windows for perfect, consistent light. A kitchen with a large, central island she could imagine rolling dough on. A reading nook tucked into a bay window, built for two. Her throat tightened. She kept turning. A detailed drawing of the master bathroom, with a deep, freestanding tub positioned to look out through the glass wall into the private courtyard. Another of the library, with shelves designed to hold not just books, but small sculptures and artifacts. On the last page, there was no drawing. Just a single, typewritten line on an otherwise blank sheet *for EV. A foundation to build upon. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the perfect lines. This wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't a collection of stolen moments. It was a blueprint. A plan. He hadn't just been dreaming of her, he had been dreaming of a life with her. A life built not on the ruins of her past, but on a new foundation, designed with painstaking care around the woman he knew her to be. She began, but her voice cracked. She looked up at him, her vision swimming. "You designed us a home." "I designed you a home," he corrected gently, reaching out to wipe a tear from her cheek. "One I very much hope to live in with you. But it's yours. Every line, every window, is for you." The gesture was so vast, so profoundly seeing, that it dwarfed Liam's grand, public proposal. That had been a performance for a crowd. This was a secret shared between two people in a sunlit room. It was the difference between being owned and being cherished. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her tightly, his face in her hair. "I love you," she whispered into the crisp cotton of his shirt. The words, once so terrifying, now felt as natural as breathing. "I should have said it the moment the lights came back on. I love you, Kai." She felt him shudder against her, his arms tightening almost convulsively. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his stormy eyes blazing with a joy so raw it was almost painful to behold. "Say it again," he breathed. "I love you." He kissed her then, a kiss that was both a claiming and a surrender. It was full of years of silent longing and weeks of fraught pretense and the brilliant, terrifying hope of a future they were now free to claim. Later that evening, as they sat entwined on the sofa, watching the city lights begin to glitter against the twilight sky, her phone buzzed. It was a single text from Liam. "Liam ***, I'm leaving the city for a while. I'm sorry. For all of it. You were right. I didn't see you. I hope he does. She showed it to Kai. He read it, his expression unreadable, then simply nodded. There was no gloating, no triumph. It was simply a page turning, the final sentence of a closed book. Alara deleted the message and blocked the number. Then she dropped her phone onto the cushion and turned her full attention back to the man beside her, to the warmth of his hand in hers, to the quiet certainty in his eyes. The amnesia had been a gambit. The revenge had been a catalyst. But this quiet, solid, breathtakingly real thing growing between them, was the point of it all. Outside, the endless, glittering life of Viridia Bay carried on. But inside the quiet penthouse, for the first time, Alara Vance was no longer playing a part, hiding a truth, or building a defense. She was simply home.